On this episode of Star Trek Universe, we are talking Strange New Worlds 203, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, right after these words from our mystery sponsors.
Welcome to Star Trek Universe, the podcast where you get to listen in on two lifelong friends just sit and chat about Star Trek. And this week we got a good episode to talk about. My name is Matthew Carroll.
I'm David C. Robertson.
Dave.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tomorrow, and tomorrow.
Yeah.
It creepeth. Let's talk about this episode. Strange New Worlds. I freaking love this episode. It's so good. Tell me how you're feeling.
I really enjoyed it. I thought we got a lot of interesting character development with her.
Mm-hmm.
Still not loving Kirk. Still not loving Palia.
Sure.
Carol Kane. I seriously
Oh,
have to have closed captioning when she talks. I don't know what she's saying.
I like them both. But I particularly like Carol Kane. She was really fun.
I love the story.
It's just a really, really good story. We keep talking about, is Star Trek, do we feel like it's overwrought, or there's too much of it, or this or that? Are we losing the value of Star Trek by having so much of it? It just feels like water or whatever. But when an episode like this comes out, it makes me it justifies everything. And that's the thing, just make episodes that are really compelling like this. This felt this felt as, it wasn't as dark or as creepy, but it felt as prescient as a dark Black Mirror episode or something. The idea that she has to it's a reverse. They did a reverse Hitler, which I freaking love. The idea that you go back in time and you have the chance to kill Hitler. That's the whole that whole thought experiment. And instead she goes back and she realized she knows, because of what she's gone through, that if she doesn't save Hitler, that he's sorry for the Hitler analogies, but he's space Hitler. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's Khan.
It's Khan.
He's not even space Hitler. He's just Hitler. He was on Earth.
Right. Well, I'm just saying because it's a space show, but he's genetic augment Hitler, and she has to stop and kill this genocidal maniac, or save him, or her timeline is deleted, and it's this thing where she realizes the past happened for a reason. The things that are a part of her that she hates about herself, the fears she has about herself, it turns out in the end it was all part of some tapestry that led to a universe where Earth still has a sunset, and that's and there's some ways that's a really dark thing to say, because you're basically saying all those that terrible war had to happen, but that's the thing about time travel and killing Hitler. But man, golly, It's such a bold and interesting episode, and such a personal, emotional story for La'an. And that's the shit, man. When you can make I really love the idea that she comes to terms with her own demons. Her own things that she thinks she's gonna be. She fears being a terrible person. And she's been told her whole life she's a terrible person. And then she has to make this decision to save the man who caused all that pain. And it's just, it's good. Even when she's given that opportunity at the end, she's like, no, you can go back. He won't have existed, but you will. You've got this device. You can change the timeline. You can do it right now. And she looks seriously tempted, but she's like, no. I want to save my future. The future for everyone, not just myself, And
there's also a wonderful idea of, she's looking at this young kid who's crying and hiding in the corner in this tiny room, and she's so maybe it's not the augmentation that made him evil. Maybe it was the fact that he was experimented on and kept in this shitty tiny room and abused. Yeah.
And it's just the idea of it's easy to hate someone from afar, but when you see them as a 6-year-old or whatever, it's hard to, it's hard to hate that close up, and it's hard to hate someone when they're so innocent and young. And it's such a great episode. I love it so much. This is an episode that I will it's like I was saying, I will dine out on this for Star Trek for years, I'll be like, that's that episode. It's like one of those, we talk about Pale Moonlight or whatever.
Yeah.
In the Pale Moonlight. It's like those episodes that are just benchmarks of like, that is where Star Trek can be. And like, I just think this is one of those, and I love it.
Yeah. I would say that it was not that episode for me for the first like 2/3 of it. And then...
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, that's the thing about In the Pale Moonlight, too. In the Pale Moonlight's great, but what is amazing is the last few minutes, you're like, oh, man, he actually did it. Like, he did it. And that's so dark and interesting. Like, he let the Romulan die and took advantage of it while he could. And he's like, I can live with it. Like, it's just that's what's... So, like, if we weren't for that ending, that episode wouldn't be meaningful. But it's because of that. And this is the same way. It's like... Suddenly this whole episode feels like just driving towards that, and you realize from the beginning that's why it's La'an that had to go back,
Yeah.
So good. And of course...
That's why the guy showed up there.
Right.
Because he needed her DNA handprint to get in there.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't think about that. So good. Such a great episode. I was wondering about that, like why he... chose her, but like now it makes absolute sense. He chose her because she's like a valiant Starfleet officer who would do the right thing, but probably knew her from history. He knew her from history books of like an Enterprise officer that was really good, but also she's a Khan or a Noonien Singh.
Right.
Oh, it's so good, man! I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty great. One of the things I really love about this episode is that it confirms my headcanon.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And I kind of hate it and I kind of love it.
Yeah, as I would too, and I do, but...
Yeah. The thing I don't like is it kind of turns Star Trek time travel / universe building into Terminator. It's like, it didn't happen. Judgment Day didn't happen, but it always has to happen. Like that whole thing. It turns like the whole thing into like the wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. There are set points in time. Time is fighting against the time travelers, like not allowing it to change. Like that whole thing, I never liked that because it feels mystical. It doesn't feel like something the time would do. Like a cold analytical version of time wouldn't do that. But like I can buy in. I mean, I love those other stories. I love the Terminator, and I love Doctor Who, but like, they're just different than Star Trek for me. And I kind of want more of a like cold scientific logic to the way time travel works. But like, I can get behind it.
Yeah, and what was funny is like I was just digging through some old emails, some old saved emails, probably last week. And had found an old one, like an old saved AIM conversation with an old Star Trek buddy of mine. And I was literally saying, all they have to do really to update all of the TOS stuff is to use the temporal Cold War. This is before the end of Enterprise, by the way. This is like 1990 or like 2002 or something. I was talking about this.
Wow.
But I was like, all you have to do is use the temporal Cold War to update everything. But, and when Discovery started talking about the temporal wars, plural, and so that got so bad that even the Guardian of Forever had to leave, I was just like, I wonder if that's what they're hinting at. That any change in Star Trek is going to be because of the temporal wars. And Sarah says it pretty flat out here.
Oh, yeah. Like, we've tried to change this, but it always happens because... this was supposed to happen in 1992. Like, I love that. Like, there's a canon problem. It's a canon problem, and instead of just saying like, it is pretty beautiful. I gotta say, like the fact that like it's not like they're like in a whatever it was 1999 when we saw Voyager, they put that like the Botany Bay in the background, and it's like, yeah, it's still back there somewhere. Instead, they're like, no, it still happens. It just hasn't happened yet, and we're moving the goalpost back 80 years so that it now can matter again in Star Trek, and like it can still fit with your current timeline, and Star Trek can still feel like it's part of your world, and I do love that.
Yeah, but it has so much interesting subtext to it, especially with like when La'an goes up to the bridge after the time shift. Kirk says that with Starfleet, this is the United Earth Fleet.
Yeah.
Okay, in the third produced episode of Star Trek, that being the Corbomite Maneuver, Kirk identifies the Enterprise as a United Earth vessel. Like,
right.
they are specifically, like, I feel like with this speech that Sarah gives, they are specifically explaining everything in Star Trek is canon. Nothing in Star Trek is canon. Like,
right. Yeah.
this was every continuity error you ever had, any sliding time frame, McCoy saying it was 500 years ago that the World War II happened or anything like that. Temporal wars.
Yeah. It's great and it's terrible. Because obviously, as we've talked about with multiverse and all this stuff, that kind of shifting being able to happen removes stakes, like, from storytelling.
But it doesn't, because of this beautiful line where she says, it's almost as if time itself is pushing back and events reinsert themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, no matter how you shift the time frame, there are still stakes. The same things may happen a little differently, but the same major things have to keep happening. Like, time itself is pushing back.
Sure. But, like, yeah, it just doesn't make, like, a lot of sense. Like, the idea that, like, okay, it's happening 80 years later. Was this the 2070s? Is that right? Is that where she was? They went back to the 2070s. I'm doing that off the top of my head.
What are you talking about? Sure. Like 2070s?
Where were they in this episode?
Like 2023.
Oh, really?
Something like that, yeah. Or, like, it would have had to have been... Well, there had to have been smartphones and internet, because...
Right, no, I thought it was, like, later than now.
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't note an actual year, and I'm not sure they gave one.
Okay, maybe it was... he says some year, and then she disagrees with him, so maybe that's why it's not clear.
But yeah, no, to me, this, like, confirms that, people coming back from the future cause technology to be different.
Yeah.
It is the perfect explanation for all the upgraded aesthetics. We got more the temporal investigators from DS9, the time cops.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And you saw, like, the little display that popped up. They showed, like, multiple little, like, a main time stream with, like, loops coming out of it and, like, branches.
Oh, that's cool. No, I didn't see that.
Right before she disappeared.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I love this episode. I mean, it's a time travel episode, but it's one that, like I love time travel in general.
I do too.
This episode is not beloved for me because of the time travel. It's beloved for me because of, like, the character story,
Yeah. I even love, like, okay, whoever the actress was that played Sarah did such a good job being unhinged during that speech. Getting more and more. And, like, it was chilling when she said all this was supposed to happen in 1992 and I've been trapped here for 30 years. Like, yeah. I loved that. Like, that was just, like, that made me sick a little bit. And I love that they brought up, like, yes, Khan was supposed to happen in 92 to 96.
Mm-hmm.
I love referencing the original canon and being like, yes, this is the thing that was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I love the explanation of it.
Yeah, for sure. It's really rad.
And I don't know how else they would do it other than make it... I mean, if time travel were possible, that's what it would be, is wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. Like, it would be crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And in the original series, they had them going back in time willy-nilly just to observe.
Right. Yeah, that was really silly.
Oh, by the way, the little... someone told me that, and I haven't double-checked it, but the little device that the time traveler gives La'an to go back in time, somebody told me that was on, like, a display screen in Voyager from the Temporal Fleet.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's stupid and cool.
Why is it stupid?
No, it's stupid cool. I mean, like, it's just like, it's like awesome that it's like all these years later they make it real. It's just super cool.
Oh, yeah.
It's like funny. It's funny and, like, really, really canon specific and, like, going back in time, whatever 15, 20 years to like find like a random view screen and be like, yeah, we could use that. Like that's stupid, but it's like really like perfect and like great.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's what I mean by stupid and cool. Like the idea that they're like, sometimes the adherence to canon, which is incredibly important to me, like produces these things that I'm like, yeah, like the fact that they're like going back and rewriting the whole thing because of a line that was written in the 60s, you know what I mean? Because they said 1992 in the 60s, so now like it has to be 1992, so how can we make that make sense? And they write this whole episode and they insert that line, and it's like, in a way that's like whatever, I don't know, in a way that's like weird and funny to me, but like it's great, it's wonderful. I'm so glad they're doing it.
Well, one of the things I really love about it is that it not only does it fix the timeline, it fixes it. It can improves it.
Yeah.
Like, so Prodigy, they like to, you know, when they reference the original series, they like to show it as the original series showed it.
Right.
You know, Lower Decks kind of goes back and forth, but, you know, you could make any kind of case for it. Like, Prodigy happened before a certain small change in the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But any canon problem you have in the original series, temporal war.
100%, everything's 100% explainable now, which, I don't know, it makes absolute sense, and I like it. I love that it's explained, but also it's like a cheat code that now, in a way, they can like now get away with even more canon breaks or whatever.
Oh, definitely. And
which
they will. There's no way they can get around it.
Well, sure. I agree with that. Like, it's going to happen. We just have to like learn to figure out what, like, you know, learn to love the bomb.
Pretty much. That's what it is. So they're like, look, we understand. We're like you. We want to know why. Here's why. Now we can do whatever we want, and everything that happened before is okay.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's all I've ever wanted is a line to tell me. And it was so beautifully delivered.
Yeah, and it's couched in an episode that is so well done and so powerful emotionally, and it's memorable. It's not like they threw a line in the middle of some like procedural episode where they're like, "Oh yeah, the Temporal Wars shift things around." Like it's like this is a memorable, wonderful, beautiful line, and beautiful, like you said, beautifully delivered, beautifully written. Like the whole it's like emotional and powerful that it's causing a character you're watching have to sit there for 30 years because of the way time travel works, you know. It's you know, it reminds me of, you know, classic episodes like of Doctor Who where like the Centurion or whatever, like the guy is like stuck for 1,000 years waiting, you know.
The boy who waited.
Yeah, the boy who waited. Stuff like that. I freaking love it, man. I'm so pumped.
Yeah. I liked this Romulan character enough, this Sarah, so much that I wish they could like save an alternate version of her and bring her on the ship and reform her or something. Like, I like her. She was really good.
Really, really good. You know, that's sometimes what's so important about these episodes too, is getting those characters and those actresses and actors that like are memorable. I mean, like, you know, Khan, for instance, you know, Montalban is like great in that episode because he's a great actor. They got a great actor, and then he goes on to be Khan in the movie, and it's like, oh yeah, of course he did. He's great. And it's like stuff like that. That's like these memorable characters sprinkled through Star Trek. Yeah. There's a reason we remember from In the Pale Moonlight the guy going, "It's a fake." That was good acting, because it was good acting, Dave.
It was so good. It's not at all because it was weird and bad.
Sorry, I'm just drawing parallels, and that one came to me, and it was good.
It's not at all like he was doing a parody of like Ren Hoek from Ren and Stimpy,
right?
He sounded awful, but that episode is so good, it's okay.
Exactly. It's like memorable in a wonderful way. Okay. Well, man, I just love this episode. Do we have any feedback?
We got some feedback,
I'm guessing we do, because this episode's so freaking good.
Yeah, we do. Tim Castillo writes, next week. Dave and Matt and Dave, you guys, I don't know what to think of this Kirk. The guy's a decent actor. He's making a good character, but that character is not Kirk. He is Kirk, though. It's all timelines, man. Tim says, I thought Spock would be the more difficult target to hit, and maybe it still is, but I honestly have an easier time accepting this Spock than this Kirk. Maybe an alien performance is able to suspend disbelief a bit more easily than a human performance. In this crazy sci-fi world where one character changes timelines and two characters travel hundreds of years in the past, the thing I have the hardest time believing is that Kirk won enough money for those clothes, that enormous hotel room, and that he even got that room without a reservation. Same day, and a taxi ride to and from Vermont from Toronto, all without identification, even let alone a passport. And all in cash. That is wild. But maybe they switched cabs before and after the border and just walked across somewhere. I don't remember if that taxi had an Ontario plate or not. Speaking of which, this is just a rehash of Wrath of Khan, isn't it? They get lost in the gas cloud of modern Earth, have to outthink opponents that are stuck playing a two-dimensional game, and one of the main characters die, only to be resurrected in the end. Yep, Wrath of Khan all over again.
What?
I think he's joking.
I don't know. I don't know if he's joking or not, but just in case he is not, that's real silly. I do not think this is anything like Wrath of Khan.
La'an leaves a loaded gun on the desk next to Kid Khan. What? Yeah. I think that was purposeful, and I think we might get something else happening from that, but I did notice that.
I did not notice that. That's crazy.
Also, she disappeared right in front of him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. So yeah, she gave him a weapon he could possibly use in the future to, do what he needs to do, whatever he needs to do to take over.
Yeah.
And that's pretty wild.
Yeah. Maybe, you know what? Maybe her disappearing like that and leaving the gun, that's like Khan's version of a bad miracle. Like from Nope. Have you seen Nope?
I have, but I don't remember Bad Miracle, sorry.
The kid who is hiding under the table and sees like the ballerina shoe like standing on its end or whatever.
Right.
And he thinks that because of that and because of the fact that the monkey didn't like attack him, it meant he was chosen.
Okay.
So like Khan, this like lady comes in and like saves him, leaves a gun and disappears. Maybe that's the thing that triggers him and makes him think that he's like supposed to be this god character.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I honestly didn't notice either of those things, that she disappeared in front of him or that she left the gun. I was too distracted by the weight of the conversations and stuff. I didn't even think about that.
Like, so he's hiding, so clearly he could hear what's going on. He heard that whole conversation. He knows whole factions are coming from the future to kill him, and someone saved him. Man, that's messed up.
Pretty messed up.
That'll turn somebody into a despot. Tim continues. Hey, you know what? I've been hard on this episode, but I really like this episode. Even if this episode also pulled a classic TV and specifically CBS has no idea how computers work moment. La'an can open the biometric lock? Talk about hand wavy. But seriously, I thought this was a fun episode, a great episode for fleshing out La'an's character, and a great excuse to use Carol Kane in the episode. Could have used Billy Crystal as her human counterpart in the old shop and giving them a little wave goodbye as they go to storm the castle, though. No, I'm good. Tim says, the part of me that I liked the most was La'an calling Kirk and then just completely breaking down from such a crushing experience of going from being completely alone in universe she is a stranger to being alone in the universe where she is home.
Mm-hmm.
If she had just moved on like nothing happened, it would have been very unsatisfying. What I also appreciated is that she was caught up in a time-traveling, universe-altering, world-breaking story, and it only took one episode.
Yeah, totally. And the thing about her crying at the end is such a great point and such a great thing to bring up, because I think in this episode she got a lot of closure. And a lot of good things happened for her character, the story of her makes me emotional because I just freaking love it so much. And her getting that closure is so meaningful, but then it still doesn't fix her problems in her daily life. You know what I mean? So she still goes back and realizes I am alone here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I got closure. I understand that, like, all of this had a purpose to it. All of my, like, hatred for the augments has a, like, and for my great grandfather or whatever, like, all of those events have a purpose. And I still am here alone because I'm still ostracized. I still grew up the way I grew up. And I saved this timeline, but I still don't have a friend. It's just like, God, it's so good.
Yeah. And by the way, me personally, before I finish up on Tim here, me personally, I've been a little harsh myself on Paul Wesley because while I don't see him as Kirk, I think he's doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
He's just not playing Kirk to me. But one of the things I love about this episode, and I loved about what he did here, was how flippant he was and how skeptical he was that he should help her save her timeline in favor of his, or in favor of hers instead of his. And all it really took was finding out that his brother was alive in her timeline.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, we haven't even talked about the brother. And that, man, saying, like, say hi to Sam for me, or like that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And, so good.
And I loved that moment of realization, though, when, like, he is actively being kind of a dick and being like, no, I'm going to save my timeline. What are you talking about? And then they're talking about Sam, and you see the switch, and he's like, Sam's alive? Oh, yeah. Shit. That he did a really good job of that.
Yeah, totally agree.
Also, I did enjoy him not knowing how to start the car. That's straight out of TOS.
That's great.
Yeah. A piece of the action, I think, is the episode.
I wonder, too, we haven't had that much experience with Kirk. So remind me, Sam is the guy who was mostly on the ship last season, right?
Yeah, he had a mustache.
Yeah. Mustache Sam. And then this season, we got this Kirk. We did get one episode of actual Kirk last season, right? Like with but even that was an alternate timeline or something, right?
Yeah.
So, like, we got an alternate timeline Kirk that time. We got an alternate timeline Kirk this time. And, like, I wonder if they're sprinkling this actor into various, like, versions of Kirk so we kind of get used to him. And then maybe when he actually plays Kirk Prime, he'll, like, put a different, like, spin on it or something that we'll appreciate, I wonder.
He seemed to imply that in an interview, but I'm not seeing it so far. But
yeah, this episode he felt more like Kirk than he has to me. Like this episode, he felt it felt a lot like Star Trek IV Kirk when he's like wandering around San Francisco of the past. Like it did remind me a lot of that Kirk. So I'm falling for it a little more this episode than I have in the past.
Yeah. Well, with the revelation, the confirmation, I feel more free than I have before to like just let go of previous versions, and just enjoy the characters for what they are now.
Yeah, for sure.
Tim continues, something that really made me laugh is that I felt like the writers were breaking the story when they got to the part when the Golden Gate Bridge gets blown up. Someone spoke up and suggested they find another bridge to blow up instead for variety. I was talking to Sean Ray of that Star Trek podcast, and he said, I saw that bridge and I was like, oh God, please don't let Kirk die on another bridge. Tim says, great episode overall, loving this series more and more. I can see kids rewatching these episodes the way I watch TNG episodes recorded on VHS tapes while doing homework on my living room floor. And then he says, La'an! Then he also says, in a separate email, I'm a dummy. They didn't buy those clothes. Silly me. Everything makes sense now.
Yeah.
They stole those clothes, but everything else was a little weird for me, too. I was like, girl, that's a nice hotel room. What they doing? She's
the one who tricked the censor or whatever, right? Or was that him?
You talking about the clothes?
Yeah. When she's
one, it doesn't matter which one, but they totally just put something in the lady's bag so that the sensor would go off while she walked, and they can just leave.
Right, I get it, but it's just funny that like I don't know, they're from the future, but that was like something they figured out very quickly, that like trick. It's like, has she been on a planet where she pulled that as a kid or something? Like, I don't know, like it didn't seem to track, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah. No, that didn't bother me. She's a security chief, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
She probably looked around and saw the scanners and went, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
We got a feedback from Matthew Davis.
Cool.
He says, well, that was interesting. I love when someone takes a trope and twists it. This time it was the old, what if you could travel back in time and kill a murderous despot as a child trope. The usual thinking for doing this is more immediate. Millions would not have died senselessly, generational and cultural pain and suffering eased. Maybe someone saved has a child or grandchild who cures a terrible disease, but in the long term, will the results actually be better overall? This time, it's the villain who's gone to kill the despot as a child because of the long-term results. Millions saved, but later billions lost, plus an alliance doesn't come to be. And then we have La'an, whose ancestor is the despot in question, who could shed herself and her name of being associated with a monster if she lets him die, who falls in love with an alternate version of someone from her time period, and who can't talk to anyone about her emotional pain from losing a love and triumph of overcoming her struggle with her ancestry. Wow, what a great episode. If Pelia doesn't remember La'an, I think at some point she'll see the watch-turned detector and start to recall.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, if she would remember Leon.
I was definitely wondering if Pelia would, remember.
Yeah, I was too. She didn't encounter her this episode, right? At the end?
No, she did because she goes up and tells Pike she thinks that they should let Pelia slide on all the stolen shit.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. But we just didn't, it didn't impact Pelia's memory at all. And it's possible, I mean, it's been, however many 100 years, it's possible she just forgot. She doesn't, yeah. That's the funny thing about Pelia, I think, is, she lives forever, but she doesn't seem to have, any special abilities. I really liked that they were, in this episode, we need an engineer, and she's like, me, an engineer? Doesn't have any clue, because I guess she later becomes an engineer,
yeah,
which I thought was really fun. It's with 400 years left, you could probably become a pretty good engineer in that time, or whatever.
Yeah, I rolled my eyes super, super hard when she's like, I know an engineer in Vermont, or whatever, and I was like, oh god, it's got to be Pelia, and then she gets there. I loved, though, that she didn't know what the hell was going on. She was like, too. What? I was like, oh, good. She's not an actual engineer. She just doesn't know anything.
Yeah, I loved it. I love that kind of stuff. I love that Guinan lived so long and that, they can encounter her in the past and stuff. And, try to convince her that they're friends from the future. I just love that kind of stuff. And so this is just another good opportunity for that. I like it.
Yeah. All right, we got an email this is our last email from Stu Little, of course, who titles his email, Oh Canada. Stu says, hey, so we have the Prime timeline, the Kelvin timeline, and now we have the Ontario timeline. It makes a change from seeing California, I suppose, but also nothing reminds you you're watching a North American sci-fi show more than explicit confirmation that is filmed in Canada. Still, it was a fun diversion for the most part. I liked the focus on La'an and her chemistry with Kirk, Ontario. Alien conspiracy lady being a Romulan was a nice twist, though I would have liked it if she had changed her personality to come across as actually Romulan at that point instead of just talking the same way. No, I liked her just the way she was. She's been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
She would just talk like she's talking.
She probably did some work to become a spy there too before she landed, and then or before she went back in time, and now she's been there 30 years to acclimate. So yeah, totally.
Yeah. Additionally, there's questions about the time travel stuff I have, if La'an remembers the bridge bombing, what prevented the further stuff from happening her original timeline? Or was this always her original timeline? And how is there an alternate Spock in this universe where humans wouldn't have had as much contact with other species? Though in fairness, the mirror universe has this problem too, with all the people who exist in both timelines despite how far back the diversion went. I'm sure you appreciate the fact they kind of address the eugenics wars continuity issue with the idea that it's shifting in time, but maybe if they didn't keep going back to Khan as a topic, we could just move on. Or maybe Star Trek could stop trying to line things up with the real world and just embrace an alternate future history kicking off by now. I don't want to be in my 60s watching Star Trek Legacy's Legacy and seeing an episode where Jacqueline Picard is in 2058 New Jersey and World War III still hasn't happened yet. I'm okay with all that.
Yeah, this episode made it okay. I'm fine with it.
I'm fine. I enjoy Pelia being the anti-Guinan, it seems, with how her assistance is totally accidental and she doesn't have a scene back in the present where she remembers Lon or anything. Lanthanites are still a bit annoying as a concept, though, for how much their existence in the lore is tied to Earth. Also, that temporal agent at the end should have been Crewman Daniels, with no effort to make him look younger or address whether he's dead or not, just to mess with the fanboys. No. I like the temporal investigations, people. Yeah, no, man, it didn't bother me. Like, the sliding timeline doesn't really bother me, honestly. It's fine. It's just like comic books. They've got to keep sliding it forward for it to make sense and be relevant to us. And at least this way, the way they did it, means that it'll always be relevant.
Yeah.
Everything is relevant. Everything happened the way it should and then got changed. And for it to change, it had to have happened that way in the past. So everything is important and everything happened.
As we've been discussing, like everything is important, everything happened, but also it removes some possible stakes like that come from a single canon. And I anytime you got time travel, you're going to have that issue. And I guess it's better to just acknowledge it and make it work than like to just keep ignoring it and keep us like arguing about it for the next 30 years or whatever. So I'm glad they did what they did. Even though it's not exactly what I was expecting, it's not exactly what I want. I would like a consistent timeline, but at this point, in the 60s, they decided that 30 years out, this thing was going to happen, and like they didn't know that their show would still be running 30 years later.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you can't really help it. So now we got a 6-year-old Khan. We probably got another 10, 20 years before he could become like the leader of the world. So they've bought themselves 10 or 20 years of that time. And I do think it's important. Like, I know people say like just do alternate history or whatever, but like I do think it's important to have it line up with our timeline. Like, it makes it feel like it could be real, and I think that's cool and like it's neat. And that becomes tough if this show runs for another 200 years, but I'll be long dead. And so and anyone who really cares about original canon will be long dead. If they can scooch this out 30, 40 years, like, it's fine. Like and basically until Kirk's time happens, or I guess maybe Archer's time, like in the real world, all of this could be scooched. I guess maybe First Contact Day might be like the first like canon event that feels like it has to happen when it happened.
Yeah, maybe, but that could be shifted. I want to make sure that I'm alive in 300 years to hear some random idiot go, wait a minute, when did they make Star Trek liberal?
Yeah. What is these new woke values of Star Trek? What the fuck?
Social justice issues.
But we'll be back soon, guys. Jolan True.
Live long and prosper.
Thank you for listening to the Star Trek Universe Podcast, a Stranded Panda production. If you'd like to hear more from David C. Robertson, check out the DC On Screen podcast or maladjusted.tv for his web videos. If you'd like to hear more from Matthew Carroll, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast or listen to his music. Just search for Matthew Carroll anywhere you get music.